The Sixers are absolutely terrible. Now, this game tonight against the Knicks notwithstanding, they put up a good effort. This season has been a complete and utter disaster. This is a team that signed Paul George, that expected to compete for a championship. They expected Tyrese Maxey to take that next step. They expected Joel Embiid to miss some games, take that next step. Let's go through everything that has gone wrong so far. Number one, Nick Nurse. My opinion of Nick Nurse has generally stayed the same. I think he's an overrated X's and O's coach. I think he's very good tactically in the playoffs, making adjustments game to game, series to series. The offense this year is at a middle school level. I mean, just watching the game tonight, it doesn't take anybody who knows. It doesn't take an X's and O's guru or some basketball genius or James Naismith to watch what the Sixers are doing on offense and think, what the hell is this? I mean, every possession is just DHOs into a weave where there's a lot of movement, but there's nothing actually happening. There's no advantageous, positions gained on offense. The defenders aren't getting confused. There's nothing being run off ball. It's just a lot of Maxi dribbling. Yabu gets the ball. He gets it back. He shoots an inefficient shot. I mean, it's just terrible. And I understand the roster hasn't been good, and I'll get to that. But Nick Nurse has done a genuinely terrible job. Now let's get to the roster. The roster, assembled by Daryl Morey, and I'm going to go in on Daryl Morey here. This is a roster that you expected Joel Embiid to miss games. So you'd think you'd sign young guys that can scale up in his absence. Nope. You sign 38-year-old Kyle Lowry, who's attempted like 5 total shots inside the three-point line because he can't create his own shot. You sign Caleb Martin and Kelly Oubre, who are decent players at what they do, but they can't shoot. You sign Eric Gordon, who can't dribble or get by anybody. He runs like he's like in a hazmat suit. He's 37 years old, washed. He can shoot open threes. That's it. Does this sound like the type of players you want to surround a team with when Paul George and Joel Embiid are going to miss a lot of games? No. This team from like their 5th to like 10th guy is like some of the worst in the league. They have zero depth. So you add that into the fact that Joel Embiid is going to miss a bunch of games, and it just makes absolutely zero sense. Now let's get into the Paul George signing. Daryl Morey, 2 years ago, signs James Harden to a 1+1, a 1-year deal and then a player option. So he conceivably, gets paid his money. They can sign PJ Tucker, do all these moves, blah, 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 blah. And then he can opt out and he can sign a long-term contract. Okay, so they get to that point last offseason, and James Harden wants a certain amount of money, and Daryl Morey doesn't want to pay him that. So you let him walk. You let 34, 35-year-old James Harden walk, which is fine in a vacuum, but when you put it into the context of this team has an aging, and I say aging because he's an injury-prone center, who is suffering all these injuries, and you don't know how long his prime is going to last, who are you going to get to replace him? So you punt a year of Embiid's prime. Now, obviously, Maxey takes a step, and the team has a good season because those two are so good, but they're really not contenders because in the playoffs they face the Knicks, they lose in the first round. So then you get to the offseason, and you sign Paul George. Again, fine. That's the best case scenario. The problem is you just wasted a year of Embiid's prime. Not that it would have mattered because he got injured in the playoffs anyway. And now you're signing Paul George, who just spent the past season with James Harden, and James Harden was better than him. So you weren't willing to pay James Harden, but you're willing to pay Paul George. And this isn't like a hindsight 2020 thing. Anybody who understood basketball watched that team last year and said, oh, James Harden is a better player than Paul George. Paul George at this stage in his career is a 3-and-D wing, a third option, a facilitator, a guy who can attack off the catch, but not really a guy who you want creating at the end of games because he doesn't have that burst anymore. Now, Paul George has been disappointing this year, but he's starting to shoot better, and if he ever stops fouling, he'll be fine. But now you're at a point where the entire team stinks, Joel Embiid isn't healthy, and to cap it all off, after you signed Paul George and after you just saw Joel Embiid barely make it through the Olympic standing, you sign him to a 3-year contract extension. He's going to be making like $69 million in like 3 years. You signed him to that before he even took another dribble into this season. Why? Who are you competing with where you needed to sign him to that extension, where you just screw yourself into the future as well? So now Joel Embiid is injured, and you have Paul George, Tyrese Maxey. You're not even going to get your own first-round pick. Jared McCain's out for the year. There's no development going on because you don't even run any plays on offense, and you put yourself in this position. I'd say Daryl Morey is pissing on us and telling us it's raining, but I don't even think he's been outside in the past 3 months. Has he even tweeted in the past 3-4 months? I mean, this is ridiculous. Let's look at it like this. You're approaching the trade deadline, and the Atlanta Hawks are better than the Sixers. The Chicago Bulls are better than the Sixers. The Brooklyn Nets are only 1 game back of the Sixers, and they're actively trying to lose. So now you have this team that has no identity. And to be clear, some of this is the roster, a lot of it is the roster, but a lot of this is when you have the best player on your team and a leader of their team, when things are going bad, players look to them. It's kind of like when you're younger. Let me use an analogy. When you're younger and you're kind of scared or you're nervous and you're like, Mommy, is everything going on? Is everything like okay that's going on? And she says, yeah, honey, it's fine. She comforts you. Well, things are going wrong and they're looking for Joel Embiid and he's not even there. Where is he? He's at CHOP getting an MRI because he tripped over a rope on Christmas Day. I mean, what are we doing? This is ridiculous. The Sixers, they cannot look us in the eye. Daryl Morey cannot look us in the eye and tell us that all the Sixers need is to get to the playoffs. And once the Sixers get to the playoffs, once Joel Embiid is healthy, we have a chance. I even write down some numbers. Here's why that's ridiculous. Daryl Morey is trying to sell us on a plan that we need to get a player to the playoffs healthy and we'll be fine. The problem is that player doesn't even exist anymore. Here's Joel Embiid's numbers last year in the playoffs when he was injured. 33 points on 44% shooting, 33% from 3, 86% from the line. This is his numbers in like the 13 games this year, healthy. 45% from the field, 24 points. 45% from the field, 32% from 3, 92% from the line. So now the healthy version of Joel Embiid is not even better than the injured version. And yet our entire season is just based on this concept of nothing matters until we get Joel Embiid to the playoffs. It's lunacy. It makes no sense. And they've built this culture of where Joel Embiid can suddenly get injured and not tell us anything. If you remember last year when he tore his meniscus, they didn't even have the decency, the respect for the intelligence of their fans to call it a surgery. They called it a procedure, as if Joel Embiid is afraid of the fans thinking he's injury prone. Like, buddy, do you think we're stupid? Do you think we're brain dead? We know you're injury prone. We know you had surgery. It's not a procedure. I mean, you even have the head of the PR department making sure that it's worded a certain way. And it's very clear for people that have followed this organization for years that Joel Embiid has people in that building that, he very much cares about how things are framed. Things have to be framed a certain way. He didn't get surgery. He got a procedure. When he gets injured, they can't list him as injury with a foot strain. It has to be injury management, even though it's not rest. He's injured. And I'm just sick of it. I'm done. The Joel Embiid era was fun. We had some good moments, but the juice is not worth the squeeze anymore. You have to hope he has a healthy playoffs. He can be a decent enough to get some sort of return and move on. And we move on to the next era of Sixers basketball with Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, and picks and some sort of flexibility. Maybe Paul George is a part of that. Maybe he isn't, depending on what you can get for him. But I just had to vent because what's going on right now is unacceptable. And is Daryl Morey going to speak on this? I don't know. Right now, the Sixers are 15 and God knows what. They have 15 wins. They're closer to the top 5 in the lottery than they are to the playoffs. So maybe they can get lucky and jump in the lottery. But for now, this team is an utter disaster.